Hey everyone, and welcome back to your VRED Expert YouTube channel. In this video I'd like to talk about creating proper UVs for your texture-based light map approach. And I know I have covered this topic already in some of my other videos, but in this video I'd like to focus on an automotive example and share some best practices. For this tutorial I'm using a dataset that is a mixture of polygon meshes and also some NURBS data in here. And I will go through the different steps using the rim, as I'd like to show you the advantage of keeping and using NURBS data during the pipeline. So you probably know that in VRED you have access to the individual patches by saying show components, and then you can simply select and delete or rearrange the surfaces the model consists of. And what I will do is, currently this is a solid body, and I will remove the surfaces that are not relevant for my visualization, as this keeps the overall triangle amount low, and also later for the UV and light map generation, these areas would waste a lot of UV space we could use for our pod. And due to the fact they will get black anyways because they are surrounded by other parts, like the tire here in our example, we could simply remove them. It will also make the unwrapping process a little bit easier if this is not a solid body anymore. And the way I'm doing it, I go to my vertex face normal rendering first of all, and hide the environment so I can see a little bit better the surface outer and the surface inner. And I create these surface islands. So I try to disconnect the areas I will keep with the areas I will remove. So these surfaces I can simply remove. Then also here the backside, because there will be the brake disc. So it's disconnected here as well, and then also here where the valve is going through the rim. And now I have these islands, and I can use either the context menu, grow component selection, or use the keyboard shortcut to extend my selection until it ends and is disconnected with my other parts, and then simply delete them. So like those guys. And I can also simplify that a little bit more. Alright, that's it. Let's go back to my realistic rendering, and I can also hide the components for now. And turn on my environment. So currently my rim does not have any UVs. So what does that mean? If we go into our bake light and shadow module, let me go through the settings really quickly. I want to use the texture approach for it. I will do the baking on my GPU as it's much faster than my CPU. I will calculate an ambient occlusion with a medium quality. I'm using the Cosin algorithm as this gives more contrast. I don't use any indirect illumination for here, and for now I'm using a static resolution with 512 pixels. And here we have an option that says do a UV generation if there are no UVs available. And if we look into our UV editor, you can see that for our rim we have some material UVs that are generated automatically. If I would layout them, you can see that for each patch, VRED creates a UV island. But if we go to our light maps, you can see it's completely empty. And if this is empty and you start your baking process with a triplanar layout, VRED does a triplanar mapping and layouts all the UV shells, and this is probably the easiest and quickest one, but has some disadvantages as well. So let's bake our rim. So as you have seen, VRED has created these UVs, and if we go into our ambient occlusion rendering, you can see that they are not ideal. Not that the resolution was not enough, but we can also see that there are some hard edges here and some things that do not work that good. And if we look at our UV, you can see that there are also some very, very tiny islands in here that don't even are covered with a pixel in here. And what we want to have at the end is we want to avoid these very tiny islands. So we want to have as much as possible connected islands together, and we also want to use the maximum available texture space. As more as we use here, as smaller we can have our texture at the end, and as less baking time we will have. And we also try to avoid distortions. So really nice clean UV layout will be our goal at the end. So this is what VRED has generated. It basically does what you also can do manually. It does a triplanar mapping, it projects them, and then it does a layout afterwards, and this is what you get. Not ideal. So let's clear our baking, and also we can also delete the light maps. So what we have seen here is that this layout looks much nicer. At least it is unfolded already, and we could try to use that. So we can simply copy them over to our light maps, and then we go into our light maps and try the baking again. So the checkbox use existing lightmap UVs is enabled, and as long as there is a UV already existing, it does not do the UV generation. If you would disable that, then it overwrites that UV layout with the new one. So it's important to keep that. So let's try it again. Alrighty, it's a little bit better, I think, but what is very obvious now is that we have these edges visible here. And this is when we look closer to our UV map, you can see that they are very close to each other. And for our light maps, we need something called dilation. That is also here in the backlight and shadow module, edge dilation valued at 2 pixel value. So that's a kind of overshoot. Otherwise, these edges would be way more visible. But the problem is now that they are intersecting with each other. And what we can do, or at least try to do, is when we go into our layout settings, there's an island padding and an tile padding available. So we set that to 1, and then we can layer them again. Right, so now we have much more space in here. Let's try it, and then I can show you what other issues appear here and what we have to do to move it further. So you now can see that the edges are nearly gone. When we look at the back side here, we can see that some of the pixels are really stretched because that island here is not unfolded. It's layouted, but it's not unfolded. So let's try something else and go to unfold and layout. All right, completely different UV setup. You see that we are not really using the optimum texture space, and we still have these tiny little islands in here which might cause issues. But let's try our baking again and see what we get. Okay, it's still a bit noisy, so we have to increase the resolution or the amount of samples later. but at least we don't have that much distortion anymore, and it's slowly getting what we need at the end. So now the way I would do it. That's obviously a little bit handwork, but I'm a big fan of having the best UVs possible, so I can have a very low resolution for my texture-based light maps, to keep them small as possible, to save some texture memory at the end, because I will have thousands of objects or hundreds of objects, and I'd like to keep that as small as possible, and therefore I need good UVs. So again, I start with copying that stuff to my Lightmap UV. It will basically overwrite them, and that we can see it a little bit better, I also clear my light map, and then we go into the vertex face normal rendering and with that, and do an isolate view on that to see a little bit better what's going on now. So when I turn on my wireframe in the render viewport, and also here in the UV editor, and also the edges, I can see how my patches look like. And what I do now manually is selecting the UV islands together I think belong together for my UV layout at the end. And what we can do is, of course, we go to the island selection mode, and then I can start manually picking all the things that belongs together, I think. I also can use a box selection, not this way. This will only select the ones that are fully in the box selection. So from left to right selects everything that is completely in the box. If I do it from the right to the left, I select everything that was touched by that selection box. Unfortunately, also the ones that are not visible. And I can change that behavior by going to Edit, Selection, and disable the Use Selection mode. And now I can simply do a box selection, and it does not select the surfaces on, or the UVs on the backside. So, and I think, so these guys and these guys, and obviously these ones, they belong together. I do not select those ones, and I think this is good. This one I want to have together like this, and also maybe that outer ring. And if I now say Sue Islands over here, you see it has created one UV island out of it. So maybe that one and that one as well. All right, that looks good. Now I think those guys here can, oh, there's something missing here. Ready, Sue Islands. Okay, looks better. So now I can select those ones and deselect that ones. Righty, I've split that up. I also think this one and this one can go together. Let's see how this will turn out at the end. We can split it again afterwards if we like so. So let's merge that together. This one. And then let's have a look at the back side. Definitely want to have this and this together. So those guys together with, I see them. And now what's left is that maybe that one not. Let's see. See Island, and then those guys. All right, I sew them together. I've got something here. And okay, what's missing? Oh, now these here. So to select the easiest way to select them is, I think, if we do now an unfold and layout and see what it will generate. Not that bad. And then I can select the islands I have built already, like those, and move them out of my way. And when I now select those guys, I hopefully select everything. Yeah, that's here. So that one not. And now I can sew them together and do the unfold and layout again. All right. So what is not so good is on these rings here. So if I select that one here, you can see that now, similar to what I showed earlier, these area here, the inner one, the inner ring, will have less pixels than the outer area. But I'd like to have a good pixel contribution over the whole part. So what I will do is now I will split them up manually to avoid these kind of distortions. And I think for that part I can do it very good here by going into the edge selection mode and then double click simply on my edge I want to cut. The same for that part. I do that on the other side as well. Now, and you can see it selects when we look closer these UV edges, and then I can simply cut them and do an unfold and layout again. I also want to have here the inner area less distorted, so I select them in my UV editor. It's much easier than doing it in the 3D viewport, like this, and select that one, and here those guys and do a cut edges again. Also probably for that part, simply double click and cut edges. So as you can see, it doesn't matter where I do it, in the 3D viewport or in the UV editor. So those guys as well, let's find some good areas where I can cut them. That looks good. And for that part, maybe here. So, yep. And now let's try the unfold and layout again. This looks pretty good, except those guys. I think I have missed something here. Okay. I can also do a box selection in here while being in the edge selection mode. Let's try. Actually a little bit tricky here, but it's definitely this one. Let's hope the others are. See, that was not ideal. Maybe I sew it together again. That's also possible, right? And find another area to cut. That is easier. Maybe here. Cut edges. Let's see how it looks when I unfold that part again. Much nicer. This is actually what I want, and this is also what I want for the others. So let's see if they can be cut earlier. You can also do a box selection here. That works. And let's find the other ones. That's actually it. So it's only these two, and do an unfold layout again. Okay, still one not okay. I think you can also select the island and press F on your keyboard and have a fly to. A little bit difficult. It will also make a fly to in the 3D viewport. So as you can see, it's a little bit difficult here. Maybe it's easy in the 3D viewport, but here the edges are not ideal to cut them. So do the same here. I will select the island and sew it together at that point, and try to find another area where it's easier to cut them, like this one, I think. Yep, that looks good. And this one, and then cut them again and unfold and lay out everything again. So at least this looks good now from a distortion point of view. What can be optimized further is we are not using the maximum available UV space because we have these very long islands in here that prevent us from layouting the other islands a bit better. So what helps is splitting them into smaller pieces. Like I can cut them on the opposite side, like here, and also that one here, right? And maybe there's something on the front side we can do as well. Yeah, that one can be also split it in that area. You have seen it has introduced some new cuts. Again, I want to have as less as possible islands, but in some cases it is simply necessary to cut them manually to better distribute your islands in the UV space. And I think currently that UV layout looks pretty good to me. At least I do not know where to optimize it further. And when we look now where we have set the cuts, I think that's pretty good working. And if we introduce some edges, then we do it in these areas. So a tip would be to cut your UVs in an area where they are not that obvious visible at the end. But sometimes it is simply not avoidable. So pretty good here, I think. So let's go back to our realistic rendering, enable the environment, and then we do our shadow baking once again. Use existing UV light maps, and then let's calculate our rim again. And in the ambient occlusion rendering, you can see that, of course, we have it, but they are not that obvious and not too much. And now we can work a little bit on our quality. So currently you can see we have a texture that is 512 by 512 pixels. If I disable the wireframe, you can see the light map that was generated, and I think that is pretty good. And what we can change now is maybe the quality, which is already quite high, I think, and we can also maybe use more samples here, and maybe the denoiser will help us as well. Alright, and I think that is a pretty nice light map that was generated. And if we now look in the realistic rendering, I think that's a pretty good ambient occlusion baking we did on that part. So now let's do the calculation for all our other parts. I have unwrapped them already, so you can see there is a Lightmap UV existing for the badge and the rim screws as well. There's still a mistake, so they are on top of each other, and if I would press the layout, you can see, okay, they are now arranged next to each other, which we actually want, because it could be that they receive a different shadow, and if they would be on top of each other, they will get all the same because they have the same UV. So the easiest thing to make sure that all my UVs are aligned properly, I simply select all of the wheel and say layout. So I make sure that all my islands have also the padding and tiling of 1, and I think this is what we will use now. Interesting is the tire. So this is how I split up the tire. I cut it into 3 pieces, and also here I did a manual separation simply for using the maximum UV space. Otherwise I would have that ring that fits in here and would get less pixels at the end. Alright, so now let's select the whole wheel and go into our shadow baking. And what I will change now is if I would bake everything with a static resolution of 1024 pixels, each part, also the small ones, will get that high resolution texture, which we don't need, and we need our light map textures in relation to the size to each other. So we switch that to dynamic, and we can set a minimum, so 64 pixels for the smallest parts is fine, I think. Maximum resolution for the biggest part, whichever it will be, is also fine. I can also higher the texel intensity. 500 means we have 1 pixel for 2 millimeters, and then we simply calculate everything with, in my case, medium settings, and then let's do the bake again. And let's have a look in the ambient occlusion rendering, and I think that looks pretty good now, I think. Yeah, the good thing is that the texture-based light maps are geometry resolution independent, so even if I would use a lower tessellation, I still can get define nice little details that was not possible for the vertex-based approach. And I think with the overall result we can have a quick look into our light maps that were generated. So you can see it has created only a 64 pixel resolution for the screws and also for the valve, while my rim got now 629 pixels. And overall I'm really happy with how that looks now. So that's it from my side, and I hope you found the information helpful. Let me know what else you would like to see on this channel in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to stay tuned for more information on Autodesk VRED. Bye!